Chapter 9. The 13th of July 2009. 10 a.m. Arkali, West Bengal.
Suprabhata.
He greeted gravely with a blank, sad face. A puzzled look radiated from those swollen eyes. Chiranjeet replied with a good morning to you, too. Savitoj and Ryan had asked for the directions to the house. The 2 hours bumpy journey first to the police station and then to Arkali had left Savitoj numb in the collarbone. It was getting harder and harder to turn his head around with this suffering. Since he was still healing, his neck needed the much required rest. Mohan assisted them till the highway as he had some important work at the police station. Chiranjeet had no idea of the village, but being a scarcely populated one, tracking Amit's family in the absence of Mohan merely turned out to be an easy job. They knocked at the door of an old, dilapidated house. A fairly young man opened the door. An environment of remorse and rapine could be easily felt from the doorstep. "Is this Amit's house?" Savitoj inquired.
Yes, I am his brother. You would be.
"I am Savitoj Gill, chief investigator in Amit's suicide case."
It wasn't a suicide, it was a cold-blooded murder.
An already grieving man yelled, and a tear ran down his face. Savitoj was a bit shocked by the reply but didn't question him. The man moved inside, and Savitoj and Ryan followed. It was a well-furnished house. Too well equipped for a village. There were many minute installations on the walls and ceiling. Upon entering the house, Ryan glanced at Amit's photo in a fresh frame nailed to the wall. An old lady was lying on a bed in agony, completely immobile. Tushar Surwa lost his balance, forced to kneel on the floor amid the loud sob. Tushar Surwa had previously denied to come to the police station. He had a mother to take care of. The only option Savitoj was left with was to interrogate him at home. Ryan tried to hold up Amit's brother, but Tushar Surwa lost it and sat on the floor, weeping loudly.
Hold up. I understand your pain.
Ryan spoke gently. Confronting others wasn't Savitoj's cup of tea, so he maintained silence. Besides, he always believed that an investigator should not get carried away by people's emotions. Tushar Surwa gathered some strength and stood on his feet. He gestured towards a chair in front for Ryan and Savitoj to sit in. Chiranjeet stood beside them, as there were no more seats left. The old lady wasn't able to speak a word, but her eyes expressed the pain of her son's death that her paralyzed body couldn't. A tear rolled out of her eye and paced down her wrinkled cheek. Tushar Surwa gently approached her and wiped the trickling tear. After straightening her up on the bed, he turned back to the investigators. Savitoj still didn't think it was the right time to utter anything.
Sincere apologies, sir. I shouldn't have yelled at you.
"It's fine. I shouldn't have mentioned suicide," Savitoj said. "It's what they all are calling it at the police station. Nothing for you to be sorry about." Ryan took out his diary to write the essentials. Tushar Surwa took a pregnant pause and then started speaking without being asked.
Amit was dominant, but he was an equally loving man. As his younger brother, I always wanted to live a respectful and proud life like him. Honestly speaking, I never had a vocation of joining the armed forces. I wanted to feel pride in serving the nation by achieving something in my own craft. Amit didn't like it on a personal level but respected my choice of joining an architecture firm. Savitoj was now more convinced about Mohan's description of Amit. There were hardly any visits by Amit in recent years due to the mentioned relations. There might be more. Gradually, his love for me shrunk over the years as my choice wasn't a proud story for him to tell at army camps. After marriage, he shifted to Begankodar and lived in our father's house, which had briefly remained empty. He renovated it completely. The house remained empty for a year. We preferred to reside here due to the stories related to the station. It needed extra labor and cost to convince anyone to work there. I helped him in shaping it with the help of my creative vision. That was the last time we spent so many hours together. As his life got busy, he didn't pay much attention to ours. His visits were seldom, even during vacations. Unfortunately, after a couple of years in the army, he became friends with Dwirup Mandal. Amit considered him as a brother. But he was a traitor. A backstabbing rascal.
Savitoj and Ryan exchanged surprised glances. They never came across anyone with this name, neither in files nor with the locals. Ryan quickly licked his finger and turned a fresh page in his diary as he didn't want to leave a point unnoted. Savitoj recalled the friend Mohan was talking about. Better, the friend he never knew about. Dwirup. Who?
Dwirup Mandal. He was in the same army batch Amit was. Being from the Assam-Bengal border, they shared many common affinities and soon became good friends as there were only a few from Bengal in the camp. More often than not, whenever Amit went for holidays, Dwirup mostly accompanied him. He also came here once. He was an introvert. On this one visit, he seemed to be a good man. He was charismatic, charming, and was all family to my brother.
Tushar Surva paused. Something else caught his attention. Please continue, sir. Savitoj insisted. Tushar Surva kept staring at a jar kept on the dining table.
Amit was so excited to take that jar of marmalade on his return to the camp. Orange was his favorite. Mom made it months ago. And just a week before his death, this happened to her.
He said, pointing towards the old lady.
When the gods give punishment, all the calamities strike at once, I guess.
His heart crumbled to pieces when he looked at his sick mother. He was about to continue to tell many irrelevant stories related to Amit, but Savitoj interrupted. So, at the army base, something bad happened? Inquired Savitoj. He didn't want Tushar Surva to drown in nostalgia.
No, yes. Sorry,
said Tushar Surva as he regained his senses. Ryan simply shrugged and cut out the half line he had written about the jar, initially assuming it was relevant to the story.
In 2005, the terror of Maoists escalated in various parts of the country. Conditions in Bengal and neighboring eastern states worsened than the rest. The terrors had risen exponentially in the coming years. The terrorists had seized many lands during their reign. The government had carried out many operations to hunt all of them down. Dwirup had developed a sense of rage against the government. His parents were killed in the police firing against the Maoists in 2006. He blamed the constitution for being negligent and incapable of doing anything good for the people. When he raised his voice against the constitution, they demoted him. He left the armed forces and joined the Naxalites.
Tushar Surva took a sip of water from a glass kept on the side table. Ryan murmured something in Savitoj's ears, to which Savitoj responded with a few hand gestures. Ryan was completely engrossed in the story when his cell phone rang.
Hello, sir. It's Mohan. I am in the market. Should I come to escort you back to the hotel? Okay, come.
Savitoj didn't pay attention to the phone conversation. Tushar Surva's narration demanded his undivided attention. He was making sure that not a single point was missed.
Nah.
Mohan denied the PCO attendant to extend the call further as he hung up the phone. Tushar Surva continued.
Dwirup tried to persuade Amit to join in the madness. He told Amit about the freedom they would get, the command they would be in, the places from where they can buy militants and guns, that everything will be owned by them. Amit was heartbroken by Dwirup's decision. He denied the offer and swore to never speak to Dwirup again. Then, in November 2007, Naxalites formed the Bhumi Uchhed Pratirod Committee, which revolted against the land evictions in Nandigram. These revolts were so brutal that about 650 deaths were reported during the rage. It included several security corps and defense guards. Amit was extremely pissed by this action. It was clear that to have this level of organization and artillery, the terrorists must have connections with someone who had a vast degree of knowledge about ammunitions and had mastered the art of war. Someone with a military or police background. And he was in no doubt who might be behind these actions. Amit approached his seniors and informed them about the probable hideouts of Dwirup and his bandits. Amit led the intelligence team himself, as he knew the working of these terrorists, as well as the soil. Amit knew how they carried their horrific atrocities better than most. The Indian Army shot down many of these Naxalite bases and made sure that the complete eradication of Naxalites was done from Bengal grounds. The primary target to take down was their leaders so that the group would scamper off and wouldn't dare to rally against the government again. The planned attack was executed with a disciplined strategy, and so the casualties were minimum. Dwirup was gravely injured during the attacks as he had tried to escape but was successfully captured by the army. He retaliated a bit but wasn't tough enough to take them down. During interrogation, Amit pleaded Dwirup to gag out everything he knew. Amit was once very close to him and didn't want Dwirup to go through the rough torture, which the interrogators might use to dig out the information about the rest of his troops and the forthcoming plans. Dwirup refused to open up. After Amit's foiled attempts at sugar-coated talks, Dwirup had to taste the pain of lashes. No matter how tough and dedicated they portray themselves to be, these Naxals eventually give up. They never had a cause for any real change. Eventually, like all of them, Dwirup chickened out from the situation. After all the judiciary procedures, Dwirup was sentenced to death since he was found guilty of many crimes. Since he was facing charges of murder, attempt to violate democracy, hiring illegal arms, and human trafficking, there was no escape for him. A day before Dwirup was sentenced to hang, Amit paid him a visit, the day I regret the most. I didn't have a second's sleep that night.
Savitoj was beginning to feel the tension in his neck. Sitting up straight for a long time had strained his neck and spine, but he managed to divert his attention back to Tushar Surva.
It was the 21st of March 2008. I begged Amit to cancel his plan to visit the jail, but he went anyway. The environment turned a little somber when he visited the police station. He had to see his once beloved friend covered in scars, whip marks all over the body, some during combats and others during interrogation. As he got closer, he saw Dwirup reading, Self-Portrait, Che Guevara. Then what happened? Did he assault Amit? What else did Amit tell you about that day?
Ryan grew desperate.
No, Dwirup did not do anything violent but had a bitter conversation with Amit. He promised that my brother would get inflicted with each and every scar that he himself had on his body. Amit took it as a few nauseating flickers of lamps before it went off. So, he didn't take those provoking statements seriously. Then, on the day of execution, the Naxalites attacked the van, which was transporting Dwirup. On the way to the execution grounds, the firing began. His troops killed many of the guards and successfully abducted Dwirup. He hasn't been found ever since. Each and every day after that, I was always concerned about my brother's life. Now those fears have turned into reality. That swine murdered my brother.
After that day, did Amit get any direct threats?
No, none that I am aware of.
Okay, so that's all about Dwirup?
Yes, sir, that's everything my brother said. He promised me not to share this story of Dwirup with anyone as there were many intricate complexities in the case. He did not want anyone to judge him by his former friendships. I honored his request. I don't think anyone in Begunkodar knows that.
Savitoj took some time to whisper a few details to Ryan for him to write down. Meanwhile, Tushar Surva reminisced. Savitoj was afraid that if they continued any further, Tushar Surva might get deluded and threaten the authenticity of the story and simultaneously make it less and less reliable. The keen eyes of Savitoj examined the rest of the house. An old shed connecting the main hall caught his eye. Contrary to the rest of the designs in the house, the shed seemed to be rusty and ill-maintained. Maybe it was just a storehouse, and no one cared about it much. A few articles were covered in bubble wrap and plastic sacks in this shed. The items seemed to be freshly covered in plastic. Some even had labels on them. Maybe freshly ordered, Savitoj wondered. After a few minutes, Tushar Surva calmed down, and Savitoj continued his interrogation. What about Amit's wife? Were there any problems between them? She didn't show up for the cremation ceremony either. Has she heard the news? Savitoj already knew the answer to this but still proceeded to inquire.
Amit didn't talk about his family issues, and neither did I care. All Amit told was that he met a girl at the Indian Institute of Technology in Madras. He had planned to marry her a year after joining the army, and a few months later, exactly that's what he did. She left him sometime later, and that's all I know. I am unaware of anything more than this on his romantic issues.
Tushar Surva stopped. Tushar Surva prepared to rest his case when suddenly he spoke again, recalling something.
But local police did call her after his murder, even before they called me,
he said, pressing his lips flat, giving a hint of being belittled by the cops. Tushar Surva continued.
It was her number he always kept on speed dial. She didn't answer the call, but I think she will come back now. It's all over the media. Even after they are infertile, no one in the world misses an opportunity to snatch a free property wholeheartedly named after their child.
Amit didn't speak about his family. But he told you that Yatika was infertile? Savitoj asked with suspicious, unblinking eyes. Tushar Surva was stunned. He breathed heavy air.
Here in the village, the things that happen around the block spread fast like a wildfire.
Savitoj gave a gentle hum, not well convinced with the answer. Tell me about the time Amit died, Savitoj continued. Did you meet him?
No, I didn't even know that Amit had returned.
What were you doing on the night of his death?
I guess everyone sleeps at night, and so do I.
That will be all for now. Savitoj spoke as he rose from the seat to leave. Ryan comforted Amit's mother and Tushar Surva. Savitoj felt an urge to speak but couldn't think of anything. What's gone won't come back, but what's left behind will hold you together for a brighter future. Savitoj said and finished tying his shoelace. No one understood his statement, not even Savitoj himself, but he'd fulfilled his urge to speak.